Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to Disturbing Cases.
News of 29-year-old Jill Maher as she made her way home in the early hours of September 22nd, 2012. Fate would place her on a direct path to danger. Her husband Tom waited anxiously for her return, but as the minutes ticked by, hope slowly began to dwindle. Little did anyone know that on this night, a predator stalked the streets of Brunswick, Victoria, and his sights were set on Jill. But who was this man seen on CCTV talking to Jill? And could he provide investigators with answers as to Jill's whereabouts? In today's case, we return to the Golden Shores of Australia. It's an inner city suburb of Melbourne, Australia, and is noted for its bohemian culture and strong art and music influence. The Sydney Road Street Party is held annually in late February as a prelude to the Brunswick Music Festival that attracts tourists from around the world. Brunswick is home to a large community of Italian and Greek immigrants who have added to the cultural diversity of the city. Due to the proximity of the University of Melbourne, Brunswick is home to a multitude of students who contribute to the energetic nightlife that's synonymous with the town. It's not unusual to see young people walking around, drifting from pub to pub as the night progresses. It was on a night similar to this that Jill Maher vanished off the streets of Brunswick. Born on October 30th, 1982, to parents Edith and George McKeon, Jill and her younger brother Michael spent much of their early childhood in Drogheda, Ireland. Jill was described as a bubbly and vivacious child who loved to entertain. Her parents also said that Jill had a very strong family bond with all of them. Eventually, the family relocated to Perth, Australia, where her father started a new job. While in Perth, Jill attended Bull Creek Primary School and Rossmoyne High School. In 1996, the middle of her high school career, Jill's family returned to Ireland. Jill completed her high schooling at the Drogheda Grammar School before enrolling at community college. In 2004, her parents returned to Perth, Australia, but Jill stayed back in Ireland. She then went on to graduate with a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Dublin. While working at the student bars, she met Tom Maher, to whom she was instantly attracted. The couple began a serious relationship and eventually married in July 2008. Jill is remembered fondly as the petite woman with a powerhouse personality. Jill and Tom eventually followed after her parents and settled in Melbourne, Australia. Her natural flair for entertainment and love for drama and the arts saw her begin her career at the Australian Broadcasting Company as a unit coordinator. She sometimes helped with on-air work at the 774 ABC Melbourne radio station. Tom and Jill decided to wait before starting a family, deciding instead to enjoy their married life together first. It was a good thing too, as Jill had been juggling married life, work life, and her parents after her father had recently suffered a stroke. She'd spent some time with her parents in the fall of 2012 before returning to Tom and work in early September 2012. After returning to work, a colleague celebrating a birthday invited Jill along for a night out. It was a typical thing for Jill to spend evenings with her friends from the office. It was on this very night that tragedy struck. Friday night, September 21st, 2012, Brunswick was alive with students and people looking for a place to unwind after a stressful work week. Jill and several of her colleagues from the broadcasting company met for drinks at the Brunswick Green Bar Hotel on Sydney Road. It was a popular place, and people constantly moved in and out of the pub. After a few drinks at the pub, Jill and her group moved on to another popular bar called Bar Etiquette, also on Sydney Road. At around 1:30 a.m. on Saturday morning, September 2012, Jill and her friends were ready to call it a night. Another male colleague offered to walk home with her, but Jill waved him off. She explained that her flat was only a 5-minute walk from the bar, and that she'd be fine. Despite a night of drinking, Jill was still of sound mind and promised the group that she'd be safe. She knew the area well and had done this a few times before. As she made her way home to her husband Tom, she called her brother Michael to talk about their father. This was the last time anyone would ever hear from Jill. Tom Lauer woke abruptly at around 4 a.m. that morning to discover Jill was not in bed. This was out of character for Jill. If she was going to be out late, she would call and inform him. He checked his phone, but there was no call. He then called out for her before checking the apartment, believing she may have gotten out of bed. There was just no sign of Jill anywhere. Tom then tried calling her phone, but she didn't answer. He then contacted her friends, who all said that Jill had left the bar at around 1:30 a.m. that morning. Concerned, Tom dressed quickly and decided to go out and look for Jill himself. He walked up and down the streets between the bar and their flat. He searched every corner and alleyway, but couldn't find Jill or any trace of her. Tom then called the police to report Jill missing. Her friends, in the meantime, took to Twitter and began circulating images of Jill and information of her last whereabouts. Police quickly arrived at the flat Jill and Tom shared. They questioned him and collected evidence in order to rule him out as a suspect. It was normal police procedure, as Tom was Jill's spouse, and in crimes involving couples, the spouse is always the first suspect. Tom, however, was quickly ruled out as a suspect. For one, he seemed as shell-shocked as the colleagues who were last seen with Jill. Another factor was the lack of evidence of a struggle in the flat itself. While one team of police questioned those who last saw and spoke to Jill that night, another team scoured the streets and alleyways for any clues to Jill's whereabouts. Within hours of Jill's disappearance, a Facebook page was started to generate leads and tips on Jill's whereabouts. Flyers with Jill's face were handed out and posted up in public places, focusing on the area where she was last seen. On Monday, September 24th, 2012, 2 days after Jill went missing, police discovered Jill's purse off an alleyway on Hope Street in Brunswick. The area was very close to Tom and Jill's flat. However, police were curious as to how the purse was so conveniently discovered. They'd searched the area thoroughly and had not found the purse in any of their previous sweeps of the area. On the same day, the homicide department officially took over the investigation. The discovery and reassignment of a new task force did not deter Tom's hopes that Jill would be found safe and alive. He went on to give interviews with local media, asking for Jill's safe return. But while Tom pleaded for Jill's safe return, and police tried to find clues from the discovery of the purse on Hope Street, a new piece of evidence was about to push their investigation forward. A worker from the Duchess Boutique on Sydney Road discovered CCTV footage from the night of Jill's disappearance. On Tuesday, September 25th, 2012, police received and reviewed the footage. Although grainy, they could make out a man wearing a blue hoodie pacing outside the shop between 1:30 a.m. and 1:42 a.m. The man walked by about 4 minutes before a grainy image of Jill appeared on the right side of the screen. From the footage, police deduced that the man engaged in conversation with Jill for a short while. It was also visible that Jill, for some reason, turned and showed him her phone before walking away. The man in the blue hoodie followed Jill until they went completely off camera. The disappearance of Jill Maher was making national headlines around Australia, and police used this to their advantage. The CCTV footage was broadcast on all major news networks, and appeals were made to the public with help in identifying the man in the blue hoodie. Investigators returned to the apartment of Tom and Jill to recover more possible evidence. This included the couple's car that was taken in for forensic testing. Investigators then turned to technology for answers. They were able to procure the records of both Jill and Tom's cell phone records. Tom's phone had remained in the vicinity of Brunswick, while Jill's phone had pinged off several towers along the Tullamore Freeway near Moreland Road. It became clear to investigators that whomever had abducted Jill was traveling by car. Forensics on the car belonging to Tom and Jill did not provide any evidence that would link a dead body being transported. This ruled out Tom as a suspect officially. Now, investigators relied on the public for answers. In the course of the investigation, police received hundreds of tips. The Facebook page alone garnered over 100,000 likes and shares, and Twitter had become focused on finding Jill Mahar. But investigators were soon about to get their biggest lead yet. A tip from one of the police hotlines led investigators to the name of a man, 41-year-old Adrian Ernest Bailey. The biggest twist in the case was about to come. Investigators were about to uncover disturbing information about their new suspect. Bailey was no stranger to the criminal underworld. On September 27, 2012, at around 2:30 p.m. that afternoon, police arrived at the back room on Bud Street in Coburg, Melbourne. There they arrested Adrian Bailey and took him in for questioning. Prior to his arrest, investigators had done their homework and discovered Adrian's dark past. Born Adrian Ernest Edwards on July 14, 1971, he was the eldest of 5 siblings. Raised in Melbourne, Australia by parents Ernest and Christine Edwards, Adrian had a fairly normal childhood. At 18, Adrian married his high school girlfriend after she'd fallen pregnant in 1989. Adrian's life of crime started early on in their marriage. In June 1990, Adrian was accused of assaulting his sister's 16-year-old girlfriend. 2 months later, in August 1990, he attempted to assault another 17-year-old girl as she walked home from the bus stop. Adrian allegedly poked her in the eyes before taking off her clothes and running away. In December 1990, he abducted a 16-year-old girl who was hitchhiking and drove her to a remote area with intent to assault her. Fortunately, his victim escaped and sought help from the strangers who disrupted the attack. Adrian was identified and arrested in January 1991. He pled guilty to all 3 offenses in June 1991 and served a minimum 3-year jail sentence. Upon his release in April 1993, Adrian enrolled in a culinary course. He completed an apprenticeship, qualifying as a pastry chef. He returned to his wife, but by 1995 they separated, and he lost custody of both children. That same year, he began a new relationship and had another 2 children. Between 1995 and 2000, Adrian remained under the radar and changed his name from Edwards to Bailey by deed poll, a legal document that proves a person's change of name. Adrian seemed to have turned a new leaf. But a leopard never changes its spots. In 2002, Adrian was charged with attacking and assaulting 5 prostitutes between September 2000 and March 2001 in St. Kilda, Melbourne. He was sentenced to 11 years in prison with a non-parole period of 8 years. After 8 years, Adrian was released on parole on March 17, 2010. He returned to his second wife, but that too ended in divorce. He began another relationship in October of 2011, seemingly mending his criminal ways. He and his girlfriend moved into a back room in Bud Street in Coburg, Melbourne. In February 2012, Adrian's violent streak reared its head again. He allegedly got into a fight with a 20-year-old man and ended up breaking his jaw and leaving him unconscious. He appeared at the Geelong Magistrates Court and was sentenced to 3 months in prison for the attack. However, Adrian appealed the sentencing and was released from custody until a date could be set for the hearing. In the meantime, he began working as a laborer digging holes for piping. As Adrian Bailey sat in the interrogation room, investigators were quick to obtain a search warrant for his home on Bud Street. On paper, Adrian was the prime suspect for the crime, but until they could find physical evidence, the case was only circumstantial at best. Prior to his arrest, they were also able to obtain more CCTV footage detailing Adrian's movements over the course of the weekend following Jill's disappearance. Another warrant was given to investigators to obtain Adrian's cell phone records, and police uncovered a wealth of information. Over the course of 6 hours, Adrian denied any involvement with the disappearance of Jill Mahar. To investigators, he seemed very confident about his innocence. But as other teams started to discover the clues that linked him to the case, they chipped away at his defenses. The first thing investigators discovered was Jill's SIM card in Adrian's home. When confronted with this evidence, he denied any knowledge of how the card ended up in his home. Investigators questioning Adrian questioned him based on the various pieces of video footage obtained between September 22nd and September 24th, 2012. He played this off as being busy with daily chores and having no relevance to the case at hand. Investigators, however, believed these were the movements of a man trying to cover up his tracks. Adrian still did not break. The final piece of evidence brought in was the cell phone records. It showed that Adrian's cell phone and Jill's cell phone traveled the same route toward Gisborne, but that only Adrian's cell phone returned to Melbourne. Furthermore, a toll road camera on Moreland Road captured an image of Adrian's car and number plate, confirming his whereabouts on the night of Jill's disappearance. Not holding back, investigators painted Adrian a picture of how Jill was stalked and attacked before being abducted. It was a risk they were willing to take to break the confident facade of their suspect. Everything in that moment hinged on Adrian Bailey making a confession. Their tactic paid off. Adrian Bailey broke down and confessed to abducting and murdering Jill Meagher. By 10 p.m. on September 27, 2012, Adrian led investigators to the shallow grave on Black Hill Road and the remains of Jill Meagher. The coroner would later confirm that due to the lacerations and bruising on Jill's body, she'd been assaulted before being strangled to death. At 2 a.m. on September 28, 2012, a hearing was called to charge Adrian with the assault and murder of Jill Meagher. It lasted a mere 90 seconds before the judge ordered him to be held on remand to await trial. According to later reports, Adrian attempted to take his own life to avoid a trial while in custody that same night. Investigators pieced together the events of the night based on Adrian's confession and the CCTV footage they recovered. Jill Meagher had left her colleagues and decided to walk home at around 1:30 a.m. on Saturday, September 22nd, 2012. Adrian had been wandering around town, attempting to cool off after having a heated argument with his girlfriend. It was while walking along Sydney Road he spotted Jill and approached her just after 1:30 a.m. She'd been talking on her phone and did not notice that he'd made his way toward her. He lingered close behind until she ended the call before making a move to talk to her. They'd made idle chit-chat, and he continued to walk with her as she turned off onto Hope Street, just blocks from her apartment where her husband slept. He made several advances, but she rejected him. Adrian then made his move and tried to grab her and kiss her. Shocked, Jill reacted defensively by jerking back before slapping him hard. Already angry and frustrated after the fight with his girlfriend, he overpowered Jill and dragged her to the ground in the alleyway. Adrian then proceeded to assist Jill and tried to silence her screams by holding her mouth shut. Once he was done, she began screaming and threatened to call the police. As she began to dial, he reacted instinctively and grabbed her by the throat. He strangled her to death. After he realized what he'd done, he returned on foot to his home in Coburg and grabbed a shovel. He then returned to the alleyway at around 4:20 a.m. that same morning before the search for Jill could begin. He drove her body 40 minutes away to Gisborne in South Australia and buried it in a shallow grave on Black Hill Road. Over the next 2 days, Adrian attempted to get rid of the evidence by taking his car to the car wash and disposing of Jill's bag in the alleyway where he'd killed her. The reaction to the discovery of Jill Meagher's body was immense. An Australian flag, along with the ABC flag, were lowered to half-mast at the broadcaster's Southbank studios. On their website, a statement was released in memory of Jill and the massive impact she had on everyone who'd been in her life. The broadcaster also thanked the police for steadfast dedication to the case and their quick arrest of the suspect. The very same day, the Facebook page dedicated to finding Jill received over 600 messages of condolence. It's also believed that Jill's story was shared on over 12 million Twitter threads the same evening. Thousands of flower bouquets began to appear in various locations associated with the disappearance and murder of Jill Meagher. Police were forced to dismantle these tributes as they were causing a disruption with traffic flow and movement of people in the town. Numerous messages of condolences were also written in chalk on the footpath where Jill was murdered. A candlelight vigil was also held on the evening of September 28, 2012, at the Brunswick Baptist Church. Similarly, a memorial service was held at St. Oliver's Community College in Drogheda, Ireland, on the same evening. Thousands attended in memory of Jill, who was once part of their own family. On September 30th, 2012, photographer Philip Werner organized a public march to honor Jill's life. It was attended by over 30,000 people who walked along Sydney Road in her memory. The march not only celebrated the life of Jill Maher, but highlighted the issue of violence against women and the concerns of the public. Edith McKeon attended the march and publicly thanked everyone who took Jill into their hearts and showed their family support during the difficult time. Jill's funeral took place at a private ceremony held at Melbourne's Faulkner Memorial Park and attended by invited guests only on October 4th, 2012. The cemetery had been locked the entire day to avoid a media circus unfolding as the family said their final goodbyes. It was a celebration of her life, as many remembered the colorful personality of Jill. Jill was cremated as per the request of her family, and her ashes were taken back to Perth by her parents. The next day, on October 5th, 2012, a formal memorial mass was held at St. Peter's Church in Drogheda, Ireland, after Jill's memorial and cremation. Another march was held on October 20th, 2012, attended by 3,000 people as part of the Reclaim the Night movement. On October 21st, 2012, one final memorial was held at St. Dominic's Park in Drogheda, Ireland. A tree was dedicated to the memory of Jill, and a poem written by Jill entitled Dedication to a Friend was read at the ceremony. Before Adrian Bailey could appear in court, he was tried in the court of public opinion. The extensive coverage of the case in the news and on social media added to the public outrage. Not only was the safety of women on the streets of Brunswick questioned, but the failure of the justice system in allowing violent parolees. Public comments made on several Facebook pages dedicated to the case showed open hostility towards Adrian Bailey. Victoria Police tried unsuccessfully to have these pages removed. Premier Victoria Value suggested a law reform may be needed to avoid prejudice among the jury pool. During Adrian's pre-sentencing trial on June 11, 2013, impact statements were read to the court by those closest to Jill. Presiding Judge Jeffrey Nettle also ordered that a suppression order be lifted. This allowed Adrian Bailey's extensive history of charges to be released to the press. This only added to the rage burning in the hearts and minds of the public over their opinion of Adrian Bailey. Reforms were made to Victoria's parole laws, and by late June 2013, several new conditions came into play. These included heavy fines being imposed, and police being allowed to take action against parolees who showed a threat. Dennis Napthine, who took over as Premier of Victoria, commented after the new laws were put in place in June 2013. He said that there was no doubt that the justice system failed Jill Maher. Had changes been made sooner, the offender would have been back in jail and not on the streets. The actions taken were the minimum they could do to ensure nothing like what happened to Jill Maher ever happened again.